Are you considering moving from Vancouver over to Toronto? These two cities are the biggest travel destinations in the entire country of Canada, and migration between the two of them is quite common. But they are quite different cities with unique vibes and atmospheres. In today's video, we're going to dive into the differences between these two cities. So if you're planning a move from Vancouver to Toronto, you'll know exactly what to expect. We got a lot to cover, so let's dive into it right now. If this is your first time to the channel and you'd like to know everything there is to know about moving to Toronto and the surrounding area, then be sure to subscribe below so you can be the first to know about the current market in Toronto. My name's Philip. You know me and the team, we get texts, emails, phone calls every day from people like you, looking to make that move to Toronto, and we absolutely love it. So if you're looking to move in 8 days or 80 days, feel free to send me a text, shoot me an email, or set up a Zoom call with me. There's a link in the description. I'm happy to help you make that smooth move over to Toronto. Okay, so today we're going to talk about two of my favorite cities in the entire country, Vancouver and Toronto. I've had the privilege of living in both of these cities. Toronto, I've spent a large portion of my life, and Vancouver a little bit less. I've kind of lived there during the time that I got married. I spent a whole summer there and had a great time. I'm kind of well versed to show you guys the differences between these two cities. Now, kind of a quick story. When I first got to Vancouver in the summer, I realized very quickly that there's no air conditioning in a lot of the houses in Vancouver, which I thought was a big surprise. Growing up in Toronto my whole life, air conditioning was just pretty normal. So that's one thing off the top I want you guys to be ready for, is that you will have air conditioning everywhere in Toronto you go. It's very, very common. Houses are not built without it, but we'll get into that a bit more. The first piece I want to talk about in terms of difference between Vancouver and Toronto is the size of the city and the land mass that this whole area takes up. So Vancouver has a population of 675,000 people in the downtown core, and Toronto, as a contrast, has just under 3 million. It's around 2.8 million, so a lot more people, and the land area is quite different as well. Toronto is 5 times larger in land size, so the city's much more spread out. That's just the downtown core. Kind of scale of things over here on the East Coast is just a lot different in size. For example, Mississauga, the city just west of downtown Toronto, has a population of just over 700,000 people. So the city next door to Toronto is bigger than Vancouver downtown, just so you guys get a sense of scale here. What all this leads to is a huge sprawled out population, and travel times are affected by this. So if you need to kind of cross this large landmass, you can expect to be in your car for an hour, sometimes 2 hours if it's a lot of traffic going on, which will be quite different than Vancouver, where things are much closer together, much kind of less sprawled out, and much more accessible. And that also leads to kind of the driving style. Like when you are driving across these large areas, people tend to be a bit more aggressive in Toronto. I know in Vancouver, people are a bit more relaxed when they're driving. They kind of take their time and they don't expect others to kind of be in a rush, but that is the general vibe when you're driving around here in Toronto. Okay, next up, let's talk about housing and where you're going to be staying when you come over to Toronto. In terms of housing, rental prices are generally the same. They're pretty much on par with Toronto and Vancouver. Vancouver was a lot higher for a long time. Toronto has caught up in the last few years, and now they're pretty much on par. So if you're planning on renting a space over in Toronto, you will be paying around the same that you are probably currently paying in Vancouver. One interesting difference is in Vancouver, there are no real estate agents to help you secure a rental of a condo or a house. But in Toronto, there are agents that specialize in rental properties. So you can actually hire an agent prior to your arrival in Toronto, and they can help you do some virtual showings and kind of help you find a space, which makes it a lot easier to locate a space, because there is a lot of competition in the rental market here in Toronto, similar to Vancouver. But in terms of actually buying a space in Toronto, you will find that condos and houses are a little bit more affordable than Vancouver. Vancouver is the highest price housing market in the entire country. So you'll be pleasantly surprised. You're going to get a little bit of a discount. It's not a huge discount, around 10 to 5%, depending where you look in the core. Housing is slightly less expensive in Toronto. One other thing I want to point out that you should be prepared for is views from your condos and your houses in Toronto are not something you typically get over here. I know in Vancouver, typical house in the North Shore on the west side will have a beautiful city view or a water view, but views are just not something we see here. Typical view from a house is of another house or of a backyard. Will surprise a lot of you guys when you come over here isn't that much of a view from your condo or your house. So I want you guys to be ready when you do see that. Next up, let's talk about all the different job opportunities in Toronto and how that contrasts to Vancouver. So in Vancouver, you have a few kind of major industries. You have shipping, you have film and production, you have tourism, you have natural resource, but Toronto is just a lot more robust. We have also quite a pretty large film and production industry. It's been growing steadily over the years. In addition to that, financial services is a huge sector here. The 5 banks have their head offices in downtown Toronto. Law firms, a lot of big law firms, and then the technology is another huge kind of pillar of industry in Toronto. All the big tech firms have their head offices in downtown Toronto. Toronto is actually the 3rd largest tech hub outside of New York and San Francisco. Because of all of these, you typically earn a little bit more in Toronto, around 10 to 15% more than you would in Vancouver. But also, there is a bit of a difference on the streets. You see a lot more people in business suits for that reason. A lot more people are a bit go, 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 as compared to Vancouver, where people can be a bit more relaxed, dressed a bit more casual. So just kind of a difference of what you'll see on the streets here in Toronto. Next up, we're going to talk about geography and nature of these 2 great cities. So you'll find Toronto, when you arrive, it's a lot flatter than Vancouver. There's barely any mountains. They're mostly hills. Mountains aren't something we see here at all. The landscape is much flatter, and nature's a lot less accessible. I find in Vancouver, you have nature in your backyard. Wherever you are, you can kind of pop into the back, you'll find a trail, you'll find a mountain, you'll find something to do. But in Toronto, there are a lot of natural wonders, natural beauty, but you just have to kind of know how to find them, and you sometimes have to travel a little bit to get there. So there's lots of green space, like I mentioned, but the other important point is there are really no bears and no cougars in Toronto, something that I find very important because I like to go on hikes. And when I went to Vancouver, I tried going on a quick hike. I was gently reminded that there might be a bear on this hike, so you need to take some protection, and it just adds a little bit of extra anxiety to your hike in Vancouver. But here in Toronto, that's not a concern. There's nothing that can kill you on a hike that you may be going on, so you don't have to worry about that unless you go really far north in the province of Ontario. There are some black bears over there. But in Toronto and the surrounding area, nothing of that sort can be found. Other kind of natural pieces I want to touch on are beaches in Vancouver. There's a lot of beaches throughout the city that you can go swimming, you can go relax in the summertime. There are a few beaches in Toronto, downtown Toronto on the Toronto Islands. There are a few beaches over there. There's some in the eastern portion of the city as well, but they're not really conducive to swimming because Lake Ontario is a little bit polluted. It's had a bit of a E. coli scare in recent years, so swimming is definitely not encouraged in Lake Ontario. You may just go do some sun tanning, play some beach volleyball, do some kind of beach sports, but if you wanted to actually go to a beach, go swimming, you would need to travel outside of the city, closer to cottage country or one of the provincial parks that exists around the downtown area. All right, let's get into the weather in Toronto and Vancouver and see how they are different. So in Toronto, we have a lot more extreme weather. In the winter, it can get as cold as -40 with the wind chill factor. And in the summer, it can get as warm as +40. Compare that to Vancouver, where the winter is, around 0, -5 sometimes. And then in the summers, around the 20s is where it hovers. So a lot less fluctuation in Vancouver. That leads to a lot more kind of rain in Vancouver as opposed to Toronto, which has a lot more sunny days, from let's say June to August to September. You can have a lot of sun. Even in the winter, we have some sunny breaks. It's not all gray, but I know in Vancouver, it's not quite like that. You can get like a really long spell of cloudy days, and it can be a little bit depressing, as well as the rain that comes along with that. So a lot more snow in the winter. Our snowstorms can be quite severe compared to what you would expect in Vancouver. A snowstorm here could drop as much as 1 or 2 feet of snow within 24-hour period, which would immobilize the city in Vancouver. Even a 5-centimeter snowstorm, I know, closes down the city. People don't go to school, people don't go to work. But our snow services here in Toronto are quite sophisticated. As soon as a snowstorm is coming, they would get to work overnight, salting the streets and preparing for the snowstorm. So when you wake up in the morning, the city is fully operational, and snow, no matter how much, does not typically shut down the city unless there's a really extreme event, in which case the schools would of course be closed as well. Also connected to the weather is kind of the humidity in the air here. Toronto is kind of inside the country. We're close to some Great Lakes, but we don't have an ocean beside us like Vancouver does. So it's a lot more drier here, especially in the winter time when our humidity drops. Kind of could affect your skin. Things can get a little cracked in the winter. That's pretty normal. And also the air isn't as crisp and clean as it is in Vancouver. I remember when I got off the plane, I could just feel fresh mountain salty air, and it was just refreshing to taste that. But here it's a little bit different, right? It's not quite as fresh as you would have in Vancouver. Now let's talk a bit about multiculturalism. Toronto has been recognized by the United Nations and the BBC as the most diverse city in the world. According to official data, over half of the city's residents were born outside of Canada, making it home to nationalities from around the world. But how does all this diversity translate on the ground? Toronto isn't the only city in the world to have lots of foreign-born residents, but it is in a league of its own when it comes to countries represented. There are over 250 ethnicities present in the Toronto region, with 180 different dialects spoken. Just about every corner of the world is represented, from Portugal to Pakistan. There's nothing Torontonians love more than a street festival, and with so many different cultures around, it seems like there's always an excuse to get together and celebrate. One of the most popular and largest street festivals in North America is the Toronto Caribbean Carnival, formerly known as Caravana, which brings in over 2 million visitors each year. Another big festival is the Chinatown Festival, where you'll find martial arts performances, authentic Asian street food, and live dragon dancing. Toronto has one of the largest Chinatowns in North America in its downtown core, but it also has 5 other Chinatowns around the Greater Toronto Area, including Markham and Mississauga. For every nationality that's represented in Toronto, there's probably a corresponding neighborhood that proudly represents its cultural heritage. Some of Toronto's coolest neighborhoods to check out include Greektown, with its lively Greek tavernas and pastry shops, super cool Koreatown, charming Little Italy, unique Little India, and trendy Annex, just to name a few. With all these diverse cultures available at your doorstep, you can see the world without leaving Toronto. Next, let's talk about the food scene here in Toronto, one of my favorite subjects. And with all this diversity and multiculturalism that we just noted, it's no surprise that Toronto is a foodie's paradise. There's hundreds and hundreds of restaurants all across the city, ranging all the diverse nationalities from around the world. The problem that you will have, and that I sometimes have, is choosing where to go. That problem has been made a little bit easier in recent years because the Michelin Star Guide, the world-renowned Michelin Guide, has come across Toronto and ranked our best restaurants from 1 to 3 stars. I'm going to go ahead and put a link to that website in the description below so you guys know at least which restaurant to choose when you need to choose a restaurant. Another problem you may have is what to eat on the menu in these restaurants, and there's a solution for that as well. There's a special festival that runs in Toronto called Winterlicious in the winter and Summerlicious in the summer, and this is an event that several restaurants take part in. It includes a fixed price menu where they've pre-chosen their best menu items for you, added them on the menu. It includes dessert. It's a great kind of option to not have to choose exactly what you want from the menu, but sample the best items on the menu. In addition to great restaurants, Toronto is also home to some amazing craft breweries, really cool coffee shops, pastry shops, and very unique ice cream parlors. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. Next up, let's talk about transportation and how you're going to get around when you do end up moving over to Toronto. So in Vancouver, we have your Sky Trains or Sea buses and your typical buses. But over here in Toronto, we have the Toronto Transit Commission, or TTC for short, and that manages our subway car system and our bus system. Now, our subways are underground, which is a little bit different than the Sky Trains, which are elevated, and our subways are also manned by actual people. Sky Trains are autonomous. There's no actual drivers in the Sky Train, so that's a little bit different. And I find that the Sky Trains are actually a bit more efficient. They tend to come on time a bit more readily, and they're actually a little bit cleaner. But that being said, the subway system here and the transportation network is quite extensive. It does really interconnect a large portion of the city, and the subway system is in the middle of a really large expansion. They're adding a new line called the Ontario line, which is over a 15-kilometer stretch of subway that is coming to Toronto. Probably will take another 10 to 15 years to get here. The way the system is right now, you can definitely get around town quite effectively. The only kind of downside I would say is the system is prone to breakdown because there are so many people that use it on a daily basis. There are subway closures and train stoppages are quite normal. When that does happen, people have to kind of leave the train station, go up on a bus, take a detour to the next station over, and then go back down. So if you are planning on using the subway system to get around for your job, I would add another 20-30 minutes of travel time just in case, so that you are on time when you do need to make it for work. Okay, we covered a lot of the differences between Toronto and Vancouver. And if I was to summarize kind of the main thing that I love most about Toronto is this hustle and bustle, is this go, 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 is this raw energy you feel when you go downtown and everybody's going about their day busy, and you kind of just get fueled up on this energy and push it into your own life. So if you're thinking of moving here from Vancouver, it's potentially for a job, because a lot of people relocate for the excellent job market here in Toronto, and you're going to love being part of this energy and enjoying it and just kind of living it as if it's your own. Now, choosing where to live is a different story. It's a huge city. It's really sprawled out. Obviously, closer to your work might be an ideal first choice to just get your boots on the ground and then kind of figure out where you want to relocate, what fits your lifestyle a bit better, because Toronto is really a city of neighborhoods. Each neighborhood has a very distinct vibe, a very distinct clientele. It takes a little while to kind of just go through all of them and see which one fits you best. We are experiencing a massive wave of migration here in Toronto. Canada has set some pretty aggressive migration targets of around 500,000 people a year for the next few years, and the vast majority of those people, around 60%, end up in the Greater Toronto area. So that's where me and the team come in. We are relocation experts. We help people move from across the country or across the globe, whether you're moving here by yourself or with your family. We'd love to hear from you, whether you're moving in 8 days or 80 days. Feel free to send us a text, shoot us an email, or set up a Zoom call with us. There's a link in the description below. There's no one better to help you move over to Toronto than a local that's been living here their whole lives and knows all the amazing eclectic neighborhoods and can pair you to the best one that suits your personal needs. So on that subject, we'll be making more videos about all the different neighborhoods, kind of giving you a sense of the vibe, a sense of what's going on over here in these neighborhoods. If there's one specific neighborhood you'd like to hear more about, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to send a message to us in the comment section, and we'll be sure to make a video just about that. So that's it for today, and we'll see you guys on the next one.